how am I seeing the other person and what else could be true? Most people don't rise or fall to our expectations in a simple way, but they do respond to our view of them. Now think of a student that shows up one way in your class but entirely differently in someone else's room. People can tell when we've written them off. They can tell when we're trying to control them. And they can tell when we've already decided they're incapable. And they can usually also tell when we genuinely believe in their capacity. Because if I see you as helpless, I will rescue you. If I see you as incompetent, I will control you. And if I see you as the problem, I will attack you. But if I see you as capable, resourceful, and growing, I can coach you. I can challenge you. I can create with you. Welcome to Oxygen for Educators. I'm one of your hosts, Michelle Kinder. It's our hope to bring you thought-provoking, unscripted conversations full of actionable ideas to fuel your important work in the world. Thanks for tuning in. This space is for you. Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Kinder, and welcome back to our series on the 3 vital questions, transforming workplace drama, which is the work of David Emerald and Donna Zajonc. In our last episode, we explored the first vital question, where are you putting your focus? We talked about how our focus shapes our inner state and how our inner state shapes our behavior. Today, we're moving to the second vital question, which is how are you relating? And while that sounds simple, I think this may actually be the most revealing question of the 3. Because one of the things I've noticed over the years is that stress changes the way we see people. When we're grounded, we tend to see complexity. We see strengths and we see struggles. We stay curious and we're more likely to remember that people are carrying stories we don't know, burdens that we can't see, and challenges that we may never fully understand. But when we're stressed or overwhelmed, frustrated, scared, exhausted, our view of people often becomes much narrower. We actually start sorting as a function of a survival state. This person is the problem. This person isn't pulling their weight. This person just doesn't get it. This person is making my life harder. And often we don't even realize it's happening. What David and Donna help us see is that these ways of relating aren't just passing thoughts. They create predictable patterns that shape our conversations, our relationships, our teams, and ultimately our culture. So today, we dive into the second vital question, this how are you relating? Which I will share personally is a question that has challenged me repeatedly over the years. In fact, almost without question, if I have a feeling of unease or just ick, like something does not feel right, heaviness, just maybe even kind of that inertia, that just sense of, something's not right. I can almost always double click on that feeling metaphorically and find myself somewhere in the drama triangle, which we'll talk about in just a second. Our brains go very automatically to questions like, who is creating drama around me? Who is frustrating me? Who needs to change? But those very understandable, very relatable, very automatic questions put us in territory that is largely out of our control. There's far more agency in thinking about what happens inside of you when life gets hard, and thinking about how that impacts you and the people around you. So this question of who do you become in relationship to yourself, to other people, and to the challenges you're facing has a lot of electricity to it. That's really what the second vital question is asking us to examine. Who do you become in relationship to yourself, to other people, and to the challenges you're facing? What's your default? This question is so revealing because most of us believe that we're having interactions all day long and that we're responding to reality with the capital R, truth with a capital T. We think that we're seeing people clearly. We think we're simply reacting to what's happening, but it's far more nuanced than that. Often we're reacting to the story we've created about what's happening, and those stories can become entrenched and reinforced by our echo chambers. The stories we tell ourselves become so familiar that we stop questioning them. She's impossible. He's checked out. Nobody cares as much as I do. I'm the only one holding this together. They'll never change. Those sort of automatic stories that we've begun to interact with as if they are facts. And those stories don't just shape how we feel, they shape how we show up. And eventually they shape our relationships and our work in the world. One of the foundational ideas behind 3 vital questions comes from something called the drama triangle that I mentioned earlier. And this drama triangle was actually originally developed in, I think, 1968 by Stephen Karpman. David Emerald then built upon that work and developed what became an alternative to the drama triangle roles, which he called the empowerment dynamic, or TED for short, if that sounds familiar, if you've been exposed to this work at all. But before we get into the model itself, I want to throw up a caution flag. The drama triangle that we're going to explore has 3 key roles. The roles are victim, persecutor, and rescuer. And if you've never encountered this framework before, there's a very strong chance that your brain will quickly prepare a list of people that you experience as showing up in the drama triangle roles. As I'm describing the roles, you'll know exactly who the victims are in your life, exactly who the persecutors are, and exactly who the rescuers are. I know because that's what all of us do. But David's invitation is clear and different. Instead of casting other people, he says the work is far more powerful if you can successfully raise your awareness of how the different roles show up in you. So as you are listening, try to avoid the urge to cast others, and instead, always with that healthy dose of self-compassion, cast yourself. Because the truth is, we all play every role. And honestly, sometimes before breakfast. And the shifting into the different roles can happen so quickly that we barely notice. I'll share an example of what I mean. Imagine that you're waiting on a report from a colleague and the deadline passes and you're going to take some heat for the situation. And your first thought might be something like, seriously, why does this always happen to me? In that moment, you're inhabiting the role of victim. A few minutes later, the report arrives and you fire off a sharp email about professionalism and deadlines. You've stepped into the persecutor role. And then your colleague explains what's been going on. You feel bad. You jump in and say, you know what? You've got a lot going on. I'll just finish this myself. And now you're showing up as the rescuer. victim, persecutor, rescuer, all in the span of minutes. And that's not unusual. It's actually just the human experience. One of the reasons I appreciate this model is because it doesn't ask us to find bad people. It asks us to notice patterns within and between us. Because most workplace drama isn't created by malicious people. It's created by ordinary people responding to stress in surprisingly predictable ways. Most workplace drama is showing up in the wake of good people trying to solve problems, but they're trying to solve problems from a posture of fear or from a survival state of fight, flight, or shutdown. Maybe they're trying to protect themselves or help. Maybe there's like a sense of needing to be right because it offers a false sense of safety. And sometimes it's people just trying desperately to avoid being hurt. And that's what makes this work so powerful. It replaces judgment with awareness. And once we stop looking for villains, we can start noticing patterns. And that's where change becomes possible. So let's unpack the 3 drama triangle roles. The central role in the drama triangle is that of victim. And I want to be very clear about something. When David and Donna talk about victim, they're not talking about people who have been victimized. That's very different. They're talking about all of us and how we can step into a victim mindset. It's a way that we relate to our circumstance, a place where our lens on a situation makes us feel powerless, hopeless, stuck, like life is happening to us. One of the reasons this role can be so hard to recognize is because it often sounds quite reasonable. When we're stepping into the victim mindset, we might hear thoughts or even say things like, I would if I could. You don't understand my situation. Nothing ever changes. There's no point. What difference would it make? And if we're not careful, those stories can slowly shrink our sense of agency until we stop looking for possibilities that we might have seen before. When we're in that state, we stop focusing on what we want and become consumed by what's preventing us from getting it. I'm going to say that again. This is so important. When we are operating from the victim mindset, we stop focusing on what we want and become consumed by what's preventing us from getting it. And underneath that experience is often a lot of fear, conscious or unconscious. What if I can't have what I care about? What if I can't do what matters? What if this situation never changes? What if I don't have what it takes? Most of us know those feelings. The second role in the drama triangle is the persecutor role, which shows up a bit differently. When we're operating from the posture of persecutor, our focus shifts toward our perception of who or what is the problem, which could be a person, a team, a circumstance, anything that we perceive as an obstacle, something we perceive as being between where we are and what we want. Something out there becomes the reason things aren't working. And while persecutor energy can look like blame or criticism, it often shows up in more socially acceptable ways too, like judgment, contempt, chronic frustration, or moral superiority. The certainty that if everyone else would simply get their act together, everything would be fine. What's fascinating is that underneath persecutor energy is often fear too. David describes the underlying fear of the persecutor is that they don't want to be the victim. In other words, there's a lot of that, if someone's going down, it's not going to be me energy. Once you see that dynamic, you start recognizing how often blame and persecuting is really a form of self-protection. The last role in the drama triangle is rescuer. This is the role I think many helping professionals struggle with most. People who genuinely care are socially conditioned to fall into the rescuer unless they are paying attention to the cost of that. Rescuers usually have good intentions. They're trying to help or relieve suffering or make things easier. The problem is that rescuing often communicates something unintended. It communicates, I don't believe you can do this without me. And over time, that can reinforce the very helplessness we're trying to eliminate. One of the insights that hit me hardest when I first learned about this model was realizing that rescuing and genuinely helping are not the same thing. Helping builds capacity, while rescuing removes responsibility. Let me tell you about a way that this hits me personally. I remember a time in my life, actually more than one, but I'm recounting one in particular, where someone I loved was struggling, and I was working hard to help. I was thinking about the problem, I was researching solutions, checking in a lot, offering ideas, doing anything I knew to do to make things easier. And one day it hit me that I was carrying far more responsibility for their growth and for their outcomes than even they were. And honestly, I found I was exhausted by this. And they weren't changing. Their circumstances were not shifting, and they weren't taking ownership of that. And meanwhile, I was over functioning and definitely making it harder for them to take ownership. And underneath all of that quote unquote helping was a belief that I hadn't fully examined. I didn't actually trust that they could figure it out. And that realization was uncomfortable because I wasn't helping purely for them. I was also helping because it reduced my own anxiety. My rescuing was an attempt to manage my own discomfort. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. It changed the way I think about helping, about leadership, about parenting, because suddenly I had to ask a harder question. Am I doing this for them? Or am I doing it because their struggle is making me uncomfortable? So as you think about your relationship to rescuing, the takeaway is not, I shouldn't help. The takeaway is, can I tolerate uncertainty, struggle, and someone else's growth process without taking ownership of it? You can be servant-minded, other-centered as a leader without being a rescuer. Helping and rescuing have very different outcomes. What makes rescuing so tricky and so seductive is that it often feels virtuous. We get to feel generous, needed, and important, and sometimes even indispensable, which means we might continue to act from a rescuing place because it can meet our needs every bit as much as it appears to meet the other person's. And it is also often socially rewarded, big time. That's the uncomfortable part, because sometimes the thing keeping another person from growing isn't their own helplessness. It's our unwillingness to let them struggle or fail or discover that they are more capable than they or we think they are. I can also think about a former colleague that frustrated me endlessly. I didn't trust them. I was convinced they weren't doing what was needed and that they were beholden to the wrong stakeholders in a way that undermined what we could do for the community and our team. Every conversation I had with them or about them reinforced that story. And once I had some distance from it, I realized that I had stopped seeing a person. I was actually relating to a character that I had created and amplified in my mind. And honestly, I was so locked in about this person that I'm not sure if I could successfully unhook from my story, even today. But I do regret not having the awareness then of my role in that situation not working. So I could have at least had more ways to try to shift the dynamic that were inside out. Most of the ways I tried to shift the dynamic were about that other person changing instead of me changing. So to say it one more time, a key entry question to this work that I beg you not to miss is, how am I seeing the other person and what else could be true? Because certainty is often what keeps the drama triangle alive. Once I've decided who you are, I stop being curious. Once I've decided why you're behaving the way you are, I stop asking questions. And once I've decided that you're the problem, I stop looking for my contribution to the dynamic. And I stop looking for your humanity. What else could be true reopens possibilities, and it reopens connection. So before we move on, I want to zoom out for a second, because I think one of the easiest mistakes to make with this model is to treat these as three separate roles, but they're really not. They're three expressions of the same underlying experience. If you think about your life, the entry point is often some version of, I don't like what's happening right now. Maybe you feel frustrated, hurt, disappointed, overwhelmed, but something's, again, not right. I might feel powerless to change something that matters to me. Once you find yourself in that space of, I don't like what's happening right now, you can move in one of three directions. If you start blaming, you're inhabiting the persecutor role. If you start feeling helpless, like nothing you could possibly do would make a difference, like life is just happening to you, that's the victim role. Or if you start trying to fix, save, manage, or carry things for everyone around you, then you've stepped into rescuer. And that's why David Emerald calls our attention to these patterns. The goal is not to decide which role you are. The goal is to notice the moment you've stepped into the triangle at all. Because once you notice it, you have a choice. And that choice is where your empowerment begins. So let's switch our attention to what David and Donna developed as an alternative to the drama triangle and named the empowerment dynamic. It also has three roles. The alternative to the victim role in David and Donna's model is the creator. So from victim to creator. The alternative to persecutor is challenger. And the alternative to rescuer is coach. And I love this frame and these alternate roles because they're not about becoming nicer people. They're about becoming more effective. Instead of what's wrong, whose fault is it, why is this unfair, when we are operating from the creator role, we ask, what do I want? What do I actually want? What outcome am I trying to create? And what is the future I'm hoping to move toward? That shift alone can change everything, because the moment we reconnect to what we want, we begin stepping out of reaction and back into choice. And choice changes people. Now let's think about the challenger replacing the persecutor. The challenger still tells hard truths, addresses problems, and names reality. The difference between the persecutor and the challenger is actually intention. One is trying to win, the persecutor, and the other is trying to help someone grow, the challenger. A persecutor says, let me tell you what's wrong with you. Not in so many words, but in their actions. A challenger presents with, I know you're capable of more than this. Same discomfort, same directness, very different energy. And then there's the coach, the alternative to showing up as the rescuer. The coach asks, how will you do it? The coach believes the other person is capable, resourceful, and creative. There's a built-in assumption that the person is able to learn, grow, and solve problems. And because they believe in the person's potential and inherent value, and because their intention is about growth, not dominance, the coach asks more questions compared to the rescuer that is less curious and kind of falls more into dictating what the other person should do. The coach creates space instead of control disguised as kindness. They support someone in solving their own problems instead of rescuing and centering themselves in the narrative. So the three roles that we inhabit in the empowerment dynamic, again, are creator, challenger, and coach. But perhaps the most important question underneath this entire model, we've said it before, I'll say it again, how are you seeing the other person? The reason this question matters so much is because most people don't rise or fall to our expectations in a simple way, but they do respond to our view of them. Think of a student that shows up one way in your class, but entirely differently in someone else's room. People can tell when we've written them off. They can tell when we're trying to control them. And they can tell when we've already decided they're incapable. And they can usually also tell when we genuinely believe in their capacity. Because if I see you as helpless, I will rescue you. If I see you as incompetent, I will control you. And if I see you as the problem, I will attack you. But if I see you as capable, resourceful, and growing, I can coach you. I can challenge you. I can create with you. The way we see people shapes the way we relate to them. And the way we relate to them shapes what becomes possible between us. I think this may be the most important insight in the entire model. Long before we ever speak to another person, before we offer advice or challenge them or step in to help, we've already decided who they are. Maybe not consciously, but often we've decided. Maybe we've decided that they're incapable or irresponsible, stuck or helpless. And what's fascinating is that the other person can often feel that story long before we ever say it out loud. They can feel our judgment. They can feel our lack of confidence in them. They can feel when we've already decided that they're the problem, just like they can feel when we genuinely believe in them. And once we've made a decision about someone, our behavior tends to follow. We start relating to our internal assessment instead of the actual person, which means we can unintentionally trap people inside the stories that we're telling about them. By the way, this also applies to the stories that we tell about ourselves. So at this point in the conversation, some people may be thinking, okay, I see it. I see the victim, persecutor, rescuer. I can see myself moving through those different roles. But now what? Because the truth is, most of us don't catch ourselves when we're calm. We catch ourselves when we're activated. Usually when we're frustrated or hurt or defensive, maybe when we're tired, when we're absolutely convinced that we're right. That's where one of David's most practical contributions comes in. He talks about the importance of recognizing the choice point, a moment where we interrupt the automatic pattern long enough to remember that we have options. He offers a simple practice: pause, ground, center, choose. And I love how simple it is, because most of us don't need another complicated framework in the middle of a difficult conversation or a difficult situation. We need something we can actually remember. So pause just for a moment. Notice what's happening. Notice the story you're telling. Notice what role in the drama triangle you might be inhabiting. And then ground. Come back into your body. Feel your feet on the floor. Take a good breath. Notice that you are here in this moment, not trapped inside the story your mind is creating. So pause, ground, and then center. Reconnect to what matters, to your values, to the outcome that you are trying to create. Reconnect to the person you want to be in this interaction. And then the fourth step, choose. It's not react, it's choose. Choose whether you want to continue blaming, rescuing, or whether you want to stay stuck in helplessness. Or choose to move out of the drama triangle and into the empowerment dynamic. Maybe it's the creator calling you, asking, what do I want? Maybe it's the challenger asking, what is my intention here? Or the coach, how am I seeing this person? This practice reminds us that awareness alone doesn't create change. We have to raise our awareness so we can see we have a choice point, and it's that choosing that creates the change. The space between stimulus and response is where our freedom lives, just as Viktor Frankl said years and years ago. The drama triangle is automatic. The empowerment dynamic is intentional. The drama triangle happens to us. Empowerment requires participation, one choice at a time, one conversation at a time, or one pause at a time. So a final note before we close. As I've worked with this model over the years, one thing I've noticed is that I almost never catch myself in these roles when they're happening. Often the insight comes after the fact, after I've been feeling, overwhelmed, frustrated, controlling, after I look back and realize I jumped in too quickly, or have spent an hour of my day mentally building a case against someone in my head. I've come to think of this kind of after action review as like less as a practice of getting it right and more as a practice of paying attention, and paying attention with a lot of generosity of spirit extended toward myself and toward other people, and holding the questions. Can I notice sooner? Can I catch myself a little earlier? Can I become aware of the story I'm telling before I've built an entire case around it? Am I capable of repair after the fact? That's where the freedom starts. One reason drama is so seductive is that it offers immediate emotional relief. Blame feels clarifying. Rescuing feels helpful. And victimhood can temporarily relieve us of responsibility that feels crushing or overwhelming. The drama triangle offers what can seem like certainty, but the empowerment dynamic asks for something more from us. It asks for curiosity, accountability, patience, trust, growth, things that take longer. They set us up for very different outcomes and a much more energizing and pleasant experience of our own lives. So this week, I want to leave you with one reflection. If you would, think about a relationship that's frustrating you. Maybe it's someone at work or someone at home, or maybe it's simply someone you found yourself thinking about over and over again lately. Ask yourself, how am I seeing that person? What is it I really want? And what is my intention? What might become available within you and between you if you begin seeing them differently? If your focus is on outcome instead of problem, and if you're holding yourself accountable for the intentions driving your choices and your behavior. Because the way we see people doesn't just shape our relationships, it shapes who we become while in the relationship, and it shapes our capacity to do our work in the world. In our final and next episode of the 3 Vital Questions series, which will come out in 2 weeks, we're going to explore the third vital question, which is, what actions are you taking? Because once we understand our focus and our relationships, the next vital question becomes how we translate that awareness into action. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next week with an interview. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Oxygen for Educators. Please like, share, and follow, and if inclined, leave us a 5-star review so that we can keep making content for you. Let us hear from you if you know someone we should interview or a topic we should cover.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guest and host and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any organization. The content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as professional advice. Listeners are encouraged to use their own judgment and seek appropriate professional support when needed. Oxygen for Educators, its host, and production partners are not responsible for any actions taken based on the information shared in this podcast.